My husband, 35M, and I, 30F, had been married for 8 years when everything fell apart. In September last year, I received a shocking message on Facebook from a woman claiming my husband was cheating on me. She alleged he was using Tinder to engage with other women and even exchanging explicit photos. She provided a screenshot of a conversation along with his profile, which contained his pictures. I was devastated. I confronted him over the phone, but despite his denials, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Later that evening, I decided to download Tinder myself and found his profile just a kilometer away. Believing I had undeniable proof of his infidelity, I spiraled into anger and hurt. That night, we had a catastrophic argument and my family, wanting to help, rushed over to intervene. However, things quickly escalated. My brother, in a fit of rage, physically attacked my husband, punching him and forcing him to leave our home. The police were called, and my husband was told to pack a few things and stay elsewhere. This incident marked the beginning of our separation. My husband moved to Sydney to be closer to his ailing father, while I stayed behind with our 3 children. We arranged all communication through lawyers, and our relationship deteriorated into silence. For 14 months, he visited the kids only twice a month, and each meeting felt like a painful reminder of what we had lost. Fast forward to November of this year, when my neighbor came to my door with alarming news. Her husband had been catfishing women on dating apps, using my husband's photos, including intimate pictures of us taken from a MacBook we had lent him during the pandemic. The realization that my husband had been innocent all along hit me like a ton of bricks. The very evidence that led me to accuse him of infidelity was now revealed to be fabricated by someone else entirely. The police are investigating this matter, and I informed my husband's lawyer about what I had discovered. Yet his response has been dishearteningly indifferent. He simply stated we could discuss everything when he comes home for Christmas. This leaves me feeling anxious and desperate, fearing that he may want a divorce despite the love we still have for each other. The emotional toll on our family has been immense, affecting not only our mental health but also our finances and, most painfully, our children. As Christmas approaches, I'm at a loss about how to approach him. I deeply regret believing the worst about him, and I want to make amends. Can we find a way back to each other after everything that has happened? I fear that our bond may be too damaged, but I want to try. I know that acknowledging the pain he has suffered is crucial. He has faced not only false accusations, but also physical assault from my brother, and has been alienated from his children and his life as he knew it. The separation has likely left him feeling like a villain in the eyes of friends and family. I recognize that rebuilding our relationship will require more than just words of apology. It will take accountability from both of us, especially from my family for their role in escalating the situation. Seeking therapy could provide a safe space for us to process our feelings and start healing. I must be prepared for the possibility that he might not want to reconcile immediately. When he arrives for Christmas, I need to approach him with humility and an open heart, giving him the space to express his feelings. I hope to show him that I understand the gravity of what he has endured and that I am committed to repairing the damage. I am terrified that we might be too far gone, but I still believe that love can triumph over adversity if we are willing to confront the past and work toward a shared future. If someone cheats on you, do not give them a second chance. Don't let them deceive or manipulate you further. This situation with the original poster, Opie, is a nightmare because people are unfairly judging her for not foreseeing an incredibly unlikely scenario. What happened wasn't a typical case of cheating, but rather a bizarre series of events that led to her husband's private photos appearing on an active Tinder account near her location. Worse, that account was actively engaging with other women. It's crazy how Opie and her husband were both wronged by a malicious neighbor, who is now facing legal consequences. While it's unfortunate things became physical, Opie did what anyone in her shoes might have done under the circumstances. They're both victims. Imagine if Opie had come online before all the facts were uncovered, presenting the evidence she had at the time. No one would have believed such an outlandish explanation, like a neighbor stealing photos, creating a fake Tinder account, and catfishing people from the same vicinity. The internet probably wouldn't have suggested. Maybe your neighbor borrowed your computer and is behind all of this. Now that the truth is out, the best advice is this: shift your focus. Instead of trying to salvage your relationship immediately, focus entirely on repairing the damage done to your husband. Think about what he's lost: his reputation, the trust of others, and possibly important relationships. Everyone who believed he was unfaithful, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, or even casual acquaintances, needs to know the truth. Every hurtful comment or whisper behind his back, those need to be corrected. You need to own up to your mistake, admit that you doubted him, and begin rebuilding his reputation. Think about the tangible harm: financial losses, emotional pain, even physical harm. You unintentionally caused great damage, and while your intentions were innocent, the result was still harmful, like an accidental crime. So, take responsibility for the harm done and work towards making him whole again. This will show that you genuinely care about his well-being. There are two possible outcomes. First, he may still not forgive you. If that happens, at least you'll know that you did everything possible to help him rebuild his life, and you can hold your head high, knowing you made amends. Alternatively, he may see your sincerity and, over time, start to forgive you. If that's the case, you will have shown unwavering support for him, both privately and publicly, and with a lot of patience, you might begin to rebuild your relationship. But remember, this process won't be easy. Even if he forgives you, he might be triggered by the trauma from time to time. You may have to deal with sudden outbursts of anger or depression, and there could be times of separation. This could continue for years, especially around anniversaries or important dates, and you'll need to be prepared to apologize over and over again. Additionally, if there were any other men in your life during this turmoil, you must be upfront about it. He deserves complete honesty. If he asks and you lie or hide the truth, it will destroy any chance of moving forward. Only total sincerity and transparency will give you a real shot at reconciliation. It's not impossible to mend things. I've seen couples go through similarly tough situations and, after being apart for nearly 2 years, they came back together stronger and even welcomed a new child into their family. It's a long road, but with love and effort, healing is possible. The involvement of the police with what the neighbor did is a step in the right direction. But now it's time for you and your husband to figure out what comes next. The two key factors will be how deeply you both care about each other and whether you can handle the incredibly difficult and emotional conversations that are needed to heal from this. The logical part of his mind can understand why you believe what you did. After all, there were photos, solid, undeniable evidence that would lead anyone to the same conclusion. From a rational perspective, it made sense that you trusted what you saw. But his emotional side is where the real damage lies. He's deeply hurt, not just because you believed the lie, but because you didn't trust him. That's the part that stings the most. It wasn't just the situation itself, but the fact that your faith in him was shaken. Trust is one of the most essential pillars of any relationship, and once it's fractured, it takes time and effort to rebuild. Now, there's nothing left for you to do but sit down together and try to work through the emotional aftermath. This is a wound that may take a long time to heal, and even then, it might never fully go away. Your willingness to confront this, be patient, and show him how much he means to you is all that's in your power. You'll need to be prepared for difficult conversations and understand that his ability to forgive may not come easily. It's going to be a slow, painful journey, but it's the only way forward. In response, the user explained, "Thank you for the advice. I did think about having a therapist present for the conversation, hoping that their guidance might make things easier for both of us. But now I'm not so sure. I think maybe it's best to handle this just between the two of us. The aftermath has been devastating, especially for him. When people in our lives, his friends, my family, abandoned him based on a misunderstanding, it made everything worse. But despite all of this, I've never stopped loving him. If he's willing to give us another chance, I'm ready to do whatever it takes to regain his trust and rebuild what was lost. Still, I understand that it will be up to him now. It has to be on his terms. Someone responded by asking, "What steps have you taken to make amends? Have you made sure to inform his friends and your family that he was wrongly accused? Have they apologized for turning their backs on him?" It's important to differentiate between regret and remorse. Regret means you're sorry things turned out the way they did. But remorse means you truly understand the pain you've caused him. I'm not hearing that remorse from you yet, and I don't see it in your actions either. Have you done anything to repair the damage beyond explaining what happened? Later, the user posted an update. A lot of people have been asking for an update, so I wanted to share what's happened since we found out my neighbor had been using my ex's photos to catfish other women. After sitting down and having a long, difficult discussion, we both agreed that our marriage couldn't be repaired. He's now in therapy, and he asked for a clean break. No further contact between us in the future. I've promised to respect his wishes and will communicate only through his lawyer when it comes to matters involving our children. Since then, I've been working hard to clear the air with both our families and friends. I've made it clear that he was wrongly accused and have been faithful all along, but rebuilding his reputation is a slow process. She continued, "I also want to explain the situation surrounding the argument that led to my brother assaulting my ex. That night, I called my mother, asking if she could take the kids for the evening because things were getting heated, and I didn't want them around the conflict. My mother was worried about me and insisted that they come over instead. When they arrived, my father suggested I talk to my ex and try to calm things down, while my mother helped me get the kids' things together. My brother waited outside, but when my ex came out of the house, my mother casually mentioned something about him possibly cheating. My brother, who already didn't trust him, reacted impulsively. As my ex approached, my brother punched him, and the situation escalated quickly into a physical fight on the front lawn. My brother was remorseful immediately afterward, even before we found out that my ex had been innocent all along. It's a terrible sequence of events, one that has hurt many people and left our lives in ruins." She finished. "Now, my focus is on my kids, managing my depression and coming to terms with the divorce. The pain from everything that's happened is still raw, but I'm trying to move forward. I know I'll never forget this, but I'm hopeful that, with time, the weight of it all will become a little lighter." In the comments, many people expressed deep sympathy for her ex-husband, saying they could understand why he chose to leave after all that had happened. Some pointed out that it might be wise to distance herself from her brother for a time, as his actions contributed to the unraveling of her marriage. Others reflected on how devastating the experience must have been for her ex. Losing his marriage, being falsely accused and physically assaulted, all due to misunderstandings and rash judgments. Several remembered the original post and had predicted that too much damage had been done for the relationship to survive. In the second story, the poster and his wife Rose, both 53 years old, found themselves in a difficult situation involving their daughter, Sarah, and a secret that had been kept from their youngest child for many years. The couple had Sarah when they were just 22 years old. Despite their youth and financial struggles, they did their best to raise her. But when Sarah was 15, she became pregnant, which led to an incredibly difficult and emotional time for her. Sarah went to therapy to cope with the situation, but she never told her parents who the father was, something that remained a source of tension between them. Every time the subject came up, it caused Sarah significant distress, so her parents stopped pushing for answers. At first, Sarah wanted to terminate the pregnancy, but she kept postponing it. Later, she decided to give the baby up for adoption. 5 months into the pregnancy, while meeting with a social worker, Sarah's chosen adoptive couple backed out, leaving her without an adoption plan. It was then that she asked her parents if they would consider adopting the baby. Opie and Rose, who had been thinking about having another child, agreed to take in the baby girl Ellie. 2 years later, the couple had a biological son, Logan. From the beginning, Opie and Rose always intended to tell Ellie she was adopted, but they were conflicted about revealing the whole truth, which would include telling Ellie that her sister, Sarah, was actually her biological mother. Sarah, for her part, had distanced herself from Ellie almost immediately after the birth. She moved out to live with her aunt and rarely visited. While she maintained a sisterly relationship with Logan, she remained distant from Ellie. This created a noticeable emotional gap between them, which became more evident as Ellie grew older. Opie once noticed that Sarah had posted a family photo on Instagram, but Ellie had been cropped out of the picture. When confronted, Sarah admitted that it was too painful to include Ellie in the photo, though she wouldn't explain why. A few years ago, Sarah showed up drunk at her parents' home, begging to see Ellie and calling her my daughter. Opie later learned that Sarah had suffered multiple miscarriages while trying to conceive with her husband, and she had been struggling with the emotional toll of infertility. Eventually, Sarah and her husband used a surrogate and had twins, Jack and Jill, who are now 3 years old. Despite the distance she had kept from Ellie, Sarah encouraged Ellie to bond with the twins, inviting her over for family time along with Logan. Ellie enjoyed being an aunt, and the connection seemed to bring some healing to the family. Given how close Ellie had become to the twins, Opie and Rose suggested to Sarah that it might finally be time to tell Ellie the truth about her adoption. However, Sarah insisted that she wasn't ready. Recently, Ellie, now 15, came to her parents to reveal that she was pregnant. Unlike Sarah's situation, Ellie's pregnancy was planned with her childhood friend, and both families are aware and supportive of the young couple's decision to keep the baby. Now, Opie and Rose faced the difficult task of navigating this delicate family situation, balancing their desire to tell Ellie the truth with Sarah's ongoing reluctance to face the past. The baby is 3 months along, but we haven't told Sarah yet. We're not sure how to approach the situation, and we're uncertain about how she will handle the news. My wife and I have discussed telling Ellie the truth, but we feel it's important for Sarah to be present when that conversation happens. One commenter, Hito, suggested that perhaps Sarah's reluctance to discuss the father of her child could be due to something traumatic, that she might have been assaulted, which could explain her emotional distance from her daughter and her desire to terminate the pregnancy. The commenter's theory was that Ellie might be the result of this attack. While Sarah has never confirmed this, we've always suspected that something like this might have happened. If anyone knows the truth, it would be Sarah's therapist, but we understand that anything said in therapy stays confidential. Another commenter, Lonan, advised that we have a conversation with our son about contraception, if we haven't already. They also questioned why Ellie's pregnancy would be the catalyst to tell her about her adoption, suggesting that it might be overwhelming to reveal such information now. I responded that we're considering delaying the conversation, but at the same time, we're unsure how Sarah will react to Ellie's pregnancy. We've already talked to all 3 of our children about contraception, but Ellie and her boyfriend chose not to use protection during their first time together, thinking they could avoid pregnancy by being careful. A third commenter, Transportation Fund 219, brought up the possibility that one day Ellie might do an off-the-shelf DNA test and discover her biological origins on her own. They wondered what would happen if this occurred. I agreed that I wouldn't want Ellie to find out through a DNA test, especially if Sarah had been assaulted. I also wouldn't want Ellie to come into contact with her biological father if that were the case. Now for the update. I decided to write an update because I've been receiving more messages asking for one. Initially, I was looking for advice on how to navigate the fact that my daughter, Ellie, 15, is pregnant, but this situation is complicated by the fact that her older sister, Sarah, 31, is actually Ellie's biological mother. Ellie is 4 months pregnant now, and we've decided to focus on supporting her through this. We didn't want to stress her out further by revealing her adoption at this moment, though we acknowledge we should have told her much earlier. While we don't know much about Ellie's biological father, Sarah has always been clear that she would be the one to share that information when the time came. A week after my original post, Ellie shared her pregnancy news with the family. She has since told my parents, her boyfriend's grandparents, and finally Sarah. Sarah didn't take it well at first, but she assured Ellie that she would support her. Afterward, Sarah reached out to us, clearly upset, but she also said she was ready to tell Ellie about the adoption and that she wanted to discuss her biological father with Ellie privately. We had a family meeting where Sarah told Ellie the truth about her adoption. Understandably, Ellie was upset but calmed down after some time. She had questions about her biological father, and Sarah had a private conversation with her. While I didn't know the specifics of what was said, Ellie later told us she now knew who her father was, but had no interest in reaching out to him. We respected her decision and moved on. However, just the other day, I received a call from my sister-in-law, Renee, 31F, who is married to my brother Ethan, 32M. She was furious and accused Sarah of putting disturbing ideas into Ellie's head. Once I calmed her down, Renee explained that Ellie had messaged Ethan, telling him about her adoption and claiming that he was her biological father. She also told him that he was going to be a grandfather. This confused me, as I've never been particularly close to Ethan due to the large age gap between us. He's 21 years younger than me, and our relationship has always been distant. I called Sarah to confront her, and after a long conversation, she admitted that Ethan is, in fact, Ellie's biological father. Sarah and Ethan were very close growing up, as they were only 8 months apart in age. When they both hit puberty, their relationship changed. Every time they visited their grandmother, they would hide away together. Sarah was emotional while telling me this, but she insisted that their relationship had always been consensual and that Ethan had never assaulted her. However, she had never told me the truth because she was ashamed that her uncle was the father of her child. I later spoke to Ethan, who denied everything when Ellie reached out to him, but admitted the truth to me in private. We exchanged harsh words. While their relationship might have been consensual, I was furious that he had slept with his niece and that he had kept this secret for so long. Worse still, he had known about Sarah's pregnancy from the beginning, but chose not to step up or say anything. Ellie has also been informed of the truth. She told me that she was hurt but not entirely surprised, as she had always felt she looked more like my stepdad's side of the family. Her comment hit me hard because looking back, I can see the resemblance now. I had always known that Ellie favored her biological father in appearance, but I never suspected Ethan. My mother and stepfather are now aware of the situation, and Ethan has admitted the truth to Renee, who has left him and taken their children to stay with her family. Ethan has since tried to reach out to Ellie, but I don't want them to have any contact. As far as I'm concerned, I'm still Ellie's father, and I don't believe it's safe for her to be in touch with him. Ellie doesn't seem interested in speaking with Ethan either. When I asked her why she had reached out to him in the first place, instead of talking to Sarah or us, she said she simply wanted to hear his side of the story, but now feels betrayed by the years of lies. To clarify the family dynamics, Ethan and I have always had a distant relationship. He was born after my father passed away, and our mother married her co-worker 3 months before Ethan's birth. This caused a significant rift between us and our sisters, who have cut ties with him completely. As for Sarah, yes, Ethan knew he was a father from the very beginning. He wanted Sarah to have an abortion, which is why she initially considered it, but ultimately she decided on adoption instead. Yesterday, I shared my concerns with her about her safety. She had gone out with some friends and texted me around 1 a.m. to say she'd be coming home alone using public transportation. Without a driver's license, the thought of her traveling alone at that hour filled me with anxiety. I immediately felt uneasy and told her it was dangerous, offering to pick her up instead. Despite my worries, she insisted she could handle it and wanted to prove she was independent. As the minutes turned into an hour and she still wasn't home, I found it impossible to sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of all the potential dangers she could encounter on her way back. I stayed awake, consumed by worry, until she finally walked through the door. My relief was short-lived, as I quickly realized she was furious. She felt insulted and accused me of not trusting her capabilities, which stung because I cared about her well-being. In that moment, instead of taking a step back, I made a terrible decision. I thought I could demonstrate the physical disparity between men and women, believing that it might help her understand my fears. At first, she laughed, thinking I was joking, but when I insisted I was serious, she agreed to the challenge. I told her to try to pin me down as hard as she could, expecting her to see how much stronger I was. When she tried, I easily overpowered her, holding her down to the point where she couldn't escape. I continued this for several minutes, waiting for her to surrender. I watched as her initial frustration turned into genuine fear. Tears streamed down her face, and despite her knowing I wouldn't hurt her, the humiliation and helplessness I imposed on her were overwhelming. I had crossed a line I never should have approached, and my actions shattered her sense of security. That night, I slept on the couch, consumed by regret. The next morning, she avoided discussing what happened, claiming she was fine, but it was obvious she was still upset. I felt horrible about how I had damaged her confidence, and I feared she would never feel safe walking alone again. I hated that I couldn't simply trust her to take care of herself. In my attempt to protect her, I had done the opposite, and I knew deep down that this relationship might be over. As I reflected on my actions, I recognized that what I had done was more than a mistake. It was a violation of trust and respect. I assaulted her in an effort to teach her a lesson, and that realization filled me with shame. I regretted my actions deeply and wished I had made a better choice. In the following weeks, I struggled with the fallout. She called me a couple of days later to break up, and I could hear the hurt in her voice. She wanted me to admit that I had enjoyed seeing her cry, but I couldn't bring myself to accept that. I realized, however, that there was an uncomfortable truth in her accusation. The feeling of overpowering her, combined with the sight of her tears, had stirred something unsettling within me, a mix of dominance and arousal that made me sick to my stomach. The days after the breakup were some of the hardest of my life. I felt like I had lost everything, including my self-respect. It became clear that I needed help, so I started going to therapy. It was a painful process, but I was determined to confront my flaws. I surrounded myself with supportive family and friends who, while they didn't necessarily agree with my actions, wanted to help me heal. Looking back, I now see that she didn't need a reality check. She was cautious and aware of her surroundings. She just didn't expect me to respond in such a violent manner. My attempt to assert my strength was misguided and harmful. I hadn't realized that being cautious has nothing to do with physical strength. It's about common sense and instinct. I haven't had much contact with her since the breakup, but she called me a couple of days ago. The conversation felt light, focused on life updates rather than the past. She's thriving, about to graduate with her master's, and starting to date someone new. Hearing her voice again brought back a rush of emotions, and while I'm glad she's happy, I can't deny that I miss her. As for myself, I've been focusing on healing. I still attend therapy, not just to process what happened, but also to have a safe space to talk without judgment. I understand now the importance of trust in a relationship and the deep consequences of my actions. It's a hard lesson learned, but I'm committed to ensuring that I never let my insecurities lead me down such a destructive path again. Moving forward, I know it's best for both of us to continue our lives separately, but I genuinely hope she finds happiness and fulfillment in everything she pursues.